We're excited to have you join us today. A few more may join in the next few minutes, but let's get started. This is our first official webinar with the membership, the LX Consortium. And so we're excited to welcome you here. David Comisford and I will be the host for the webinar today. We have panelists Sandy Kenny and Toni Boggan, and you'll get to meet them here in a moment. Just a reminder of what the LX Consortium is and does. So we sit at this nexus between universities and employers. Our goal as an association, as a consortium, is to help students prepare for their careers and be prepared to succeed in those careers. And we do that by creating more hands-on, more real-world education programs, and by helping schools either create a new one or improve the one they've already got. And we have a lot of incredible members that are part of this. So the real goal is just to learn from each other in this community. This is our audience today. We had over 90 people sign up for the webinar, even more than the 80 I put down yesterday, and from schools all over the United States, as well as from Brazil, India, and Canada. And if you look at the people that are joining, it's a mixture of people that might be considered or titled the director of an experiential learning program. We have a number of faculty, a number of administrators, and a number of people that sit in this area of career services and student success. So we've got a broad audience today, and again, the topic is sourcing client projects, which is probably in a lot of our minds right now as we get thinking about the fall. Before we move on from there, David, do you want to just explain some of the logistics for the webinar today?
Sure, and thanks again, everybody, for joining. So any of you who've been on a Zoom webinar before, you know the drill, but just to cover all of our bases, there is a Q&A function built into Zoom. Our plan for this is to take questions throughout the webinar as we can, and as sort of the opportunity arises in the conversation. So as we go, if you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A. And then we also have dedicated time at the very end where we're going to get to as much of the overflow Q&A as we can. And then Andrew will be asking some open-ended questions. For those, you can use the chat feature to respond with your text, and then we'll read as many of these responses as we can.
So I'm just posting a chat in the chat box just so you can see that. And our goal is to make this an interactive session. So feel free to make comments and post questions as we go through this. What we hope you, what we envision this session being is, imagine that we're all sitting in the same room together, and we've got Toni and Sandy kind of up front sharing about their programs and answering questions, but imagine this is kind of our own fireside chat. So we hope you'll jump in and make comments and turn this into a discussion, not just a presentation. So with that, Sandy, do you want to just give us a brief introduction and kind of how you ended up where you are today in this position?
My name is Sandy, and I've been at the University of Arizona for 5 years. Prior to the University of Arizona, I was in technology, and then eventually moved into consulting. So my last role was with Hitachi Data Systems, running their large consulting division.
Great, thanks. Toni?
I've worked at Gonzaga School of Engineering and Applied Science for almost 13 years now. I started out as kind of a program coordinator, and then our director left one May kind of suddenly, and the dean really didn't have anyone else that could take over. There were no projects, and so he called me in, and I kind of gave the old, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play speech. And he gave me a shot at it because there wasn't anyone else. And, it's worked out pretty well. I'm not an engineer. I think of my job as more like outside sales and organization. And we've put together a really strong Capstone committee from all the disciplines, and we'll tell you more about that, but they give me the support of our academic partners. And every day I just get up and keep trying.
Thanks. One thing that we think is kind of a little bit special about the LX Consortium is that we're not just, isolating or focusing on business schools or just engineering schools or liberal arts programs. The whole idea is that we're all thinking about the same thing, which is project-based learning, but we think about it from different perspectives. And today, we'll hear kind of some of the business perspective from Sandy and the engineering perspective from Toni. So as we think about project sourcing, I'm just curious, I'd love your feedback from the audience in the chat. When you think about all of your priorities, how high up on your priority list sits client sourcing? And maybe I'll ask Sandy and Toni that question first, but feel free to put in the chat, where does it sit on your priority list? Sandy, Toni?
It's obviously the key. We can't run the program without clients, and so for us, it's key. It's probably what we spend probably 50% of our time doing, is constantly going out in the community and talking to people and always thinking about how we can possibly get a project.
Same for us. If we don't have good quality projects, the students aren't learning correctly, and so it's got to be the top 4 or 5 things that we do all year long. And it is a year-round job to keep your hand in that and keep working with the community and finding new sponsors, as well as taking care of the returning ones.
I'm just looking through the comments on the chat. It kind of reflects what you both said. Someone said this is the #1 metric for their evaluation. And someone else said, if no projects, no program, right? So yeah, this is pretty critical. And what I found is that even when you get good at it, it doesn't mean you don't have to work at it. Like you said, Toni, it's still a year-round thing. And maybe COVID changes some things, and I think we'll get into that in terms of how much work it takes. But I think we can all agree this is pretty high on the list. So I thought it'd be helpful if we can first just hear from Sandy and Toni. Just give us kind of a snapshot of your programs. What does it look like? How many projects? How many classes? And that'll shape our conversation. Let me see if I can get us to the next slide. Sandy?
Okay, so our program has grown. When I first came on, I was handling the MBA side of the house, and then the dean asked me to also bring in the Masters of Information Systems. So that's our core class. It's a mandatory class. We have approximately 100 students, and we have 25 projects typically on a typical year, and we have anywhere from 3 to 6 students on each of those projects. Then the fall advanced class, we have the MBA and MIS. This is an elective course, so this isn't a mandatory class, but we also go out to other colleges at the University of Arizona. So we have engineering students, we have agriculture students, we have public health students, and architectural students, and so even nurses had in the past. There we have anywhere from 30 to 50 students, and we have anywhere from 5 to 10 depending on the number of projects. Then your summer class, my co-teacher teaches the summer course. So, and he actually runs it with nonprofits. So this is the evening MBA. We have 2 evening MBAs, one in Phoenix and one in Tucson. So we're a little unique in that sense. We only do nonprofits in the summer. And the reason why we only have 10 projects is we tend to assign 2 teams to each project, because the time is only 8 weeks versus 16, to ensure that our clients are getting the most that they can out of the experience and more creative ideas. So we ran that pilot last year, and we're going to continue this year, and it was very successful. This fall, we will start our business analytics, which my co-instructor will teach, Cortez, and this will be year-round projects. running in the fall and the spring, and we'll have 1 to 5 projects on that. And we'll probably tap our existing customer base in order, because as we all know, data is always such a challenge because we have relationships with them. So that's our program, and we're just growing as we move forward. We're constantly asked to include. I see the next step is including our online MBA, which is our biggest program, but at this point we haven't.
Sandy, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers here. You know, this is upwards of 50 projects a year. Does that sound right?
Yep. So we have anywhere from 30 to 50 projects. The easiest projects to source are typically the nonprofits. So for instance, this year, Tucson's largest sector is actually nonprofits. So this year, this summer, this class will actually start in a week. We did not charge for the projects. Historically, we have charged for the projects, but because what's happening in the industry and what have you, we basically offered it up for free.
Sandy, there's a question in the chat from Rick Berkey. He's curious how you and your team develop the project fees, given that they're so variable course to course. Could you speak on that a bit?
Sure. So the spring core course, when I first came on board, we were asked charging $5,000 to $7,000 5 years ago, and I slowly moved the price up to $12,000. That's the core. This is the first time the students have taken the course, so that's why it's $12,000. The fall advance tends to be our large corporations that have more complex projects. A lot of these projects actually go for a year. They start in the fall and continue in the spring, but a lot of the strategy and in-depth information is done in the fall. So they're a little more money, and it's usually our larger corporations that are engaging. The summer class, we weren't going to charge. In the first year, we really debated this, but we have found that charging allows, we know that we're going to get commitments from the nonprofit. So it's more that we see that there's a commitment, and that they understand that this is taking time of the students, and we want to make sure they're engaged. So that's how we just came up with what's reasonable but not too much, and we came up with $2,000. Now the business analytics, the reason it's $27,000 is because you take $15,000 from the fall and $12,000 from the spring, and that's how you get the $27,000. So it's actually a year project. But some of this was just based on talking to my clients when I came on board and taking it from the $5,000 up and asking them where they thought the threshold was going to be. So nobody has ever really complained about the pricing to me, only our local companies, which, we do support local companies as well. The smaller companies do, but typically none of the corporations ever have an issue with it.
Sandy, just a follow-up to that. So if you're able to charge this price, for every project, that's a decent revenue source for the program. So it's kind of a two-part question. What is that money used for? It's probably not hard to find uses for it, but what is the money used for? And do students understand that these are paid projects? Do they complain that they're not getting paid? Do they question where that money's going? Is that an issue?
So the money is used we're trying to become self-funded. We are a state university. Our funds in Arizona have been drastically cut. So we're trying to become a self-funding program, and we're not yet. So this money goes to my salary, my co-instructor's salary that teaches the technical projects, as well as events we have throughout the year. We have kickoff events and invite all the corporations in. We have, in our spring class, we have a big finale at the end, a cocktail party. It goes to that. It goes to marketing, so it goes across all those avenues. Plus, my co-teacher and I spend a lot of time traveling, and some of that goes to the travel budget as well. So it's not like we're still costing the university money, if I could be so frank. And just like all the schools, it's an expensive program, but we're trying to get to the point where we're self-funded. we're very clear with the students that they're paying and the clients feel this is a real consulting project. We strive when we're scoping to get projects that the clients are actually going to implement, because it's more rewarding for the students, and the clients tend to be more engaged. And so, they are expecting something of value, and the students understand that, and they understand why we have to charge. We're very transparent on that. We don't hide anything.
I know and I'll just follow up to that, and then we can talk about Toni's program too. At the University of Illinois, we have both kind of a paid consulting organization and the pro bono action learning projects in the classroom. And on the paid side, we actually have students sign, they sign NDAs, probably like most schools. They also sign a document that's, I think, under the heading of professional conduct. And part of that they say, I understand that I'm not going to get paid for this. I'm doing this as part of the student experience and a learning experience, and just in case something were to come up.
Yeah, well, we do treat, our program is probably a little bit unique due to my background as well as my co-instructor. We treat this as if it was a consulting program. We do not treat this as student projects, and we run it as such. And so from the get-go, the students know they're held to very high professional standards, and 35% of their grade is based on their professionalism.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think, so Toni, let's jump to you. Describe to us kind of what your program looks like.
Okay. Ours is an undergraduate program. We typically have 50 to 65 projects in a year. It just depends on how big the class is. Last year there were 64 projects. It's a 2-semester program, and we have several constituents that are involved with every team. There's the team themselves, and then we also have a faculty advisor for every team. There is a sponsor for every team, and the sponsor provides a liaison, because the team needs to know who to pick up the phone and call for direction for where their project's going. So the liaison is appointed by the sponsor. And then we have a group of 75 volunteers that comprise our design advisory board. And they are computer scientists and engineers from Spokane, Seattle. We have some from Boise and Portland. They come to campus 4 times a year, and they review the students' work and listen to their oral presentations. We try to have as many interdisciplinary projects as we possibly can, because we feel that is representative of the real world when they enter the engineering field or computer science. And so we work to find those. Our sponsors are varied. We're a Jesuit institution, and so doing pro bono work is very important to our students. They want to do things for companies that do not have revenue, so those companies don't pay anything. And then we go all the way up to our large corporations, and some of them will pay $10,000 to sponsor a project. The money that comes in from that is used to buy materials, but it's also many of the things that Sandy mentioned, which are events, printing, salaries, a variety of things that we need money for. But we also have student proposed projects, and they don't have funding. And so some of the extra money that comes in from the bigger projects, gets siphoned back out to them to pay for their prototyping materials. Engineering students often develop prototypes, and some of those can be very expensive. We had a machine made a couple of years ago that had a $65,000, bill with it. And so all of those things are taken into consideration by the sponsors when they step up to sponsor a project.
Toni, I thought that was an interesting aspect of the program when we talked earlier, where you have students that will propose a project, but they also have to include a community partner, right? Some kind of business or some kind of entity. So it's not just a student project. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yes. During the second semester of their junior year, our students, we do a lot of marketing and let them know that they have a chance to propose their own senior design project, but they will have to go through a pretty complete vetting process because senior design is really important and we don't want them to get away with real Mickey Mouse projects. So first, we have something called Innovation Saturday. That is a 6-hour event, and I bring in outside entrepreneurs and engineers, and they work with the students to come up with ideas. They explain to them how to find entrepreneurial ideas, and then they do a preliminary project proposal. Then we have an event kind of like the Shark Tank that's called the Bulldog Review, where the team has to come in and make a presentation to a group of investors who aren't really investing money, but they're letting them know if they would invest and how to improve their project. Then the students submit a final project proposal, and it is vetted by our Capstone committee, who are faculty members. And then the projects are either approved or not approved. Now, part of the process is they need to find someone from the outside of Gonzaga who will act as their sponsor. And this doesn't cost any money for the sponsor, and it doesn't take a lot of time. But one year we had a team trying to develop something for an electronic bicycle, and I don't know much about bicycling, so I went into a bicycle shop after a couple months and I said, our team is really struggling with this concept. And the bike shop owner said, oh, well, I got those for sale right here, and showed me one, and they were $40 or something. And so I thought, wow, we need to get some actual on the ground people who can give our teams this support. So that's what the external sponsor does. They talk to the students and let them know you're way off base here, or this is an old idea, or whatever. I noticed someone just asked what our disciplines are. We have civil, computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering. We have engineering management and mechanical engineering.
That's fantastic, Toni. And I'm seeing some other questions come up, and they're probably appropriate for as we move through this a little bit. I mean, both Sandy and Toni, these are big programs, lots of moving parts. So let's talk about staffing, because everyone does this a little bit differently, right? And in some cases, there's a dedicated experiential learning staff or experiential learning office. In some cases, it's people from career services, and this is one of many things that they do. Sometimes it's a lone faculty that just believes in this and they want to make this happen, but they kind of do it on their own. So I think it'll be useful to, let's look at University of Arizona. And Sandy, you want to tell us just who does what and how the staffing works?
Sure. So this is the team that I manage under as far as the Eller Business Consulting. But I want to point out that besides this group of students, or besides this group of employees, we actually have, on each of our projects, we have a faculty coach. And the faculty coach is a subject matter expert. So each of the projects have a faculty coach, which meet with the team maybe once, twice a month to coach them on research and how to approach it. Cortez Smith is my co-instructor. So Cortez comes with MIS background. So he tends to lead the projects that are more technical. I tend to handle the MBA side of it. And the way we work with the two of us, so you understand, is we're out constantly trying to recruit. So we're both recruiting and what have you, but then we both teach the class. So we teach the class and we act as partners in this hierarchy. And then underneath us, we actually have faculties that act as subject matter expert. And then we also have graduate assistants that have taken the core and have been super successful to act as project managers of 3 to 5 projects. So that's how our infrastructure. Under Cortez and I, we have Cara de Zabeldia. It's a very long name. She handles all our contracts. So we're on the call, Cortez and I, but she handles the paper flow of the contracts and also our billing. Because we're trying to be self-funding, we stay on things. We make sure we're communicating. All of our corporate partners are familiar with Kara, and so they know when they get an email from her why she's emailing. And then we have Cami, who's just joined the team prior to COVID, like 20 days prior, and she handles all of our administrative D2L, helping set up the events and what have you. So that's the team of how we operate, and it's pretty lean for the number of projects we're recruiting and scoping and students, because like I said, both Cortez and I teach all those courses that you saw before.
Sandy, a couple of questions, and I'll probably ask Toni the same one. So one question is, what changes have you made over time to how you staff, including the TAs? So what changes have you made that you're glad that you made? And then the follow-up to that is, if you could wave a wand, right, and draw out the ideal staffing, what would that look like?
Okay. Well, so when I first came on board, the faculty played a much bigger role. And when I was taking over the MBA MIS, I went and spent time with the faculty. What did they feel was worth their time? What did they feel was a waste of their time? And basically, they came back and said, we're the subject matter experts. We want to coach the students where they need it as far as expertise, but sitting in project meetings and talking about who's doing what is kind of a waste of time for us. So that's why when we brought in the program, we restructured it so that Cortez and I took on that burden. So we meet with each of the teams independently, during every week. So that's probably the biggest change. And then the other thing is we started really promoting to become IGAs very competitive. So students really want this on their resume. We look at it as this is the best of the best that have done really well, and they have to take the core course and they have to take the advanced course. And we take the cream of the crop of those students and assign them for the next spring to manage. And so typically all my GAs tend to do really well in the job market, and because they're usually on all the charts when we're meeting with corporations and what have you. So I think that has been a really positive thing. When I first started, we just used the GAs in the back and we didn't really make it fulfilling for them. So I wanted to make sure that the students were also growing and learning and getting something out of it for those who are really interested and moving into this industry of consulting. So what else? Great. Did I miss a question? You asked a lot of questions in there, so I hope I answered.
I know it's hard to answer a double-barreled question. The follow-up was, if you could wave a wand, how would you change or add to the staffing? Would you make any changes?
Yeah, if I could wave the wand, I would have somebody who is out in the community nonstop. So it's a big burden as we keep growing the programs for Cortez and I. We're in the community a lot, we're traveling a lot, and but finding somebody who has that experience and having the university be able to afford paying them, because we're dealing with senior level management and most of our project recruitment. So you need somebody, not just a salesperson, but somebody who has had communication at that level. And that's hard to find at what we're willing to pay.
That's right. That's a really tough mix, right? Yeah. One quick follow-up question, then we'll move to Toni. So one question came through on the faculty coaches. Do they get course release? Do they get pay? Are they just volunteering? A free lunch? How does that work?
So all of the MBA core faculty, so the ones that teach in the core curriculum, they all have to support me with one project a year. And then I also pay faculty, additional faculty, because we use based on the expertise of the project. So we will also engage with faculty and pay them. I think in the spring we pay them $2,000 to do this. It's not a lot of money. And in the fall we used to pay them $5,000 because budget constraints. We're moving that down to $3,000 in the fall. But the faculty that engage with us, they're doing it because they want to do it. They're the ones that are very hands-on with the students. Money is not why they're doing this, but we want to make sure that they understand and recognize that we value what they bring to the table. So. You're on mute.
Muted, Andrew.
I got caught on mute. Toni, let's hear about your program. Oh, and Toni, you're on mute. Playing the mute tag here.
There, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Our staffing model is pretty simple. It's me and I have one assistant. We work together. Her name is Megan Weed. She's been with us for 2 years now. Megan spends a lot of time with our student teams. She's in charge of ordering everything you know, making sure it comes in as planned because our student teams make a lot of prototypes. There's a lot of ordering that happens, and we found over the years that if something came in and it wasn't quite right, the students just didn't send it back. And so Megan does send it back. She tracks things, she helps me keep track of the budget and just does various things. An important part of our model is our Capstone Advisory Committee. As I said before, we have a representative from each department except engineering management. We don't have one of those right now, but we have weekly meetings with this Capstone Committee. It's a pretty big commitment for them to be on the Capstone Committee. They have to be advising a team, and then, like I said, we have weekly meetings. They teach the sessions. We have 5 academic sessions per year, and they are on some of our learning outcome topics, and they teach those. And then the individual faculty members meet weekly with their teams to go over all of the things that are required in senior design. We have quite a few adjunct faculty, and you said wave our magic wand. That would be my magic wand, is I would have all regular tenured faculty teaching. That being said, a lot of our adjunct faculty does a really good job, and we have a lot of repeat adjunct faculty, and they are people who have been engineers and computer scientists in our community for many years, and they do a good job with the teams. They are paid a pittance, as Sandy was saying. Nobody does it for the money, but what our adjunct faculty does it for is because then they're deemed faculty and they get to stand in line for tickets to the Gonzaga basketball games. So that's the big draw. That's the best way I get the very best faculty members, and most of them are alumni. Our alums really work hard to help us with the program. They serve as design advisory board members, as adjunct faculty, and they really work hard to help us keep a strong program going. And I can't say enough about them. The most important relationships I have are with those adjuncts, with our alums. And I try to spend a lot of time with all of our graduating seniors, because they will be the people who are bringing us projects and supporting our teams in 5 years. So they have to get into a community, they have to get into their role and grow somewhat, but then they're ready to come back and sponsor projects. And that's the lifeline for me.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we spend a lot of time kind of on what you're getting to, Toni, which is the how, right? Like how do we get a company from not involved to involved, or involved to involved again? So maybe we can move to that. Maybe one question though for the group, for the audience, and you can post an answer in the chat, which is, in your program, do you have one person that this is part of their job description? Or in your program, is this, someone in a career services office and that's part of their job is to help find projects, or you've got a couple faculty and you hope they bring in some projects? Who is sourcing, and does someone have this as a primary job function?
And while folks are
I think
working,
that
go ahead, Toni.
I think in the beginning, our faculty was kind of apprehensive about turning over the sourcing of projects to someone who wasn't an engineer. But I think if you went to them or the department chairs now and said, are you ready to take this back? I think most of them would tell you, no, we don't want it back. Their time and their energy as PhD faculty members is better spent teaching, researching, developing things than it is going to all of the events that I go to in a month. All of the open houses, I stop by all the different clients' offices and take them a tub of licorice and talk to them. And our faculty don't really want to do that as much. And so I think this model works pretty well. When our center develops the social events that we have, then the faculty come and they're supportive of everything, but that way they're not the ones that have to put all this together. So it seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah, at Gies Business, we have found huge gains in centralizing the effort of sourcing clients, and not that we won't stop someone from finding a client. And we support many different courses, and we do about 150 projects a year. So we have no problem if someone wants to help find projects for us. But we have found problems where we're knocking on the same door, right? Where we both approach Caterpillar or John Deere or something, and they're kind of confused. Well, who should I talk to and who should I say yes to? So we've found just if you can centralize, I would encourage you to centralize. If you can't centralize, at least collaborate. And find some tool that allows you to centralize. So we use the EduSourced form, where even if we have other faculty or staff that are sourcing projects, at least we can say, we'll use this form, because then we know when a project comes in, and it forces us to collaborate. Well, let's jump in then. So how do we make this happen? So we'll have Sandy and Toni share again, and then I'm sure we'll have lots of questions and discussion on this. First, though, David, do you want to talk about the survey that you've run?
Sure. So we do a benchmarking survey. I think many of you on this session today actually participated, and thank you for that. So we've done one in 2019, we've done one in 2020. I figure once we get 3 years under our belt, I can start talking about this as a true annual effort. It's still pretty new, but we do for the first time have year-over-year insights. And up on the screen here, you can see our results from year over year. Few things happening here, and then there's also a piece that speaks to what Andrew just mentioned about a centralization of project-based learning. That's not reflected on this slide, but we did uncover that as a major trend. There was tremendous movement towards centralization. That was elsewhere in the survey, not covered here, but just wanted to back that point up. So if you look at faculty referrals and alumni connections, they remain the dominant force for recruiting projects, and they basically, for statistical purposes, didn't change in 2020. Now, what that's not uncovering is, are faculty operating as independent silos, or are they able to work through an office? But we also wanted to ask, what about these ancillary departments within the school? Because it seems to us at EduSource that there's really a tremendous opportunity for folks in development offices, which I noticed someone in the chat said they get some projects in their development offices. I think it was Jessica Roth. Also career offices, alumni relations. These organizations that are already there and they're already interfacing with your communities and your ecosystems, we find most often, though, they're not talking to them about project-based learning. And we've uncovered there seem to be a few reasons for that. One is, if it's not centralized, it's just tough to, if I work in a career office, who do I direct them to as a company contact to do a project? Do I send them to one particular faculty? Is there an office I can send them to? Could I send them to someone like Sandy or Toni? But those people don't exist at every school, right? So that to me is interesting. I think that's going to be the story of the next couple of years, are these other offices getting involved in helping source projects. And I think that's going to be facilitated by this holistic coordination for project-based learning. I was a little surprised to see career office role and recruitment drop, but it wasn't much. An office of experiential learning, there were huge gains there. And so that's where projects are coming from now, more so than ever, although it's still not number one. So where did that pull from? We found it pulled from student referral projects a bit. We found it pulled from third-party sourcing vendors the most. So I wanted to speak to that a little bit. So we have the word source in our name at EduSourced. It's kind of wonky branding, if I'm being honest. Our original vision was we were going to help schools source projects and build an ecosystem. What we've discovered over time is that that's helpful as sort of an ancillary offering or an ancillary auxiliary type backup source for schools. But what we found is project-based learning is just an enormous branding opportunity, community engagement opportunity for these schools. And that effort is probably best done by the school. So that's our position as a company, and our strategy supports that. So we're finding that we think schools will always there will always be a place for relying on these vendor partners for projects where needed. There's always going to be opportunity for extra projects. I think we've heard that today from Andrew, Toni, and Sandy, that getting these projects is a challenge. So that'll always be there. But we think that schools are just going to continue to get savvier and savvier about working within their existing ecosystems to pull projects. And that seems to be what the 2019 to 2020 data represents. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, David. So Sandy, walk us through how do you go about finding all those projects?
So what we do is we attend a lot of community networking events. There's a group called the Arizona Tech Council. Both myself and Cortez are members. We attend those events. I would say on average, Cortez and I are out at least a minimum of once a week and different events. We never go to the same events. We're usually going to different events, the Chamber of Commerce, any type of event that we know that there might be a potential for us. So that's probably the biggest. And in regards to David's survey, we haven't gotten any projects from faculty, none. And so we do get a lot of projects from our development area and our alumni. So there's, as every university, we have our development and our alumni staff that go around and have these events around the country. When things were more, budgets weren't so tight, Cortez and I would try to go to as many of these events as we could to network with alumni. So our alumni have really stepped up for us in the last couple of years. But probably the thing, if you link in with me, you'll find I'm always marketing on LinkedIn and very, very active on it. So, we're searching, my admin one summer, this is what she did. I said, just search LinkedIn, and anybody, I give her my password, anybody that is a University of Arizona alumni, have them link in with me. And so we went through and did that. And so we spend a lot of time, and then posting and sending marketing and newsletters. We have Salesforce in the University of Arizona, so we can see what other people are doing. But I would say a love mind development, and our dean, because our dean goes out into the community quite a bit, and he's probably our biggest supporter, and he gives us a lot of, and now in Tucson's not a very big community. I would say 80 to 90% of our projects are outside of Tucson, or are in Phoenix or in other regional areas, because we're a graduate program, our students really prefer large corporations. And so we've gotten that through just word of mouth, through people who knew other people. We're constantly thinking of how we can creatively market. Also the university community. So not so much the faculty, but other administrative staff. This is for our local projects. We'll say, hey, Sandy, my brother-in-law does XYZ. Do you want me to connect you? And so we'll reach out and send marketing. So this is how we recruit. It's really, it's a nonstop job, to be honest with you. So, but what we really try to do is to maintain our clients. Maybe you could go to the next slide, unless you're, yeah. I think there's one more slide. Yeah, so we really try to retain clients. So when I came on board, my background is large strategic sales and consulting. So I said, who owns these relationships, right? How do we manage these relationships? So we shifted the way we did things. And I went through anybody who'd ever been a client of ours, because it was treated more as a task thing. We have a project. I said, we're going to change the way we do this, and we're going to build relationships with these clients, and we're going to build long-lasting relationships so we don't have to go find them every year, right? So we spend a lot of time marketing to our clients. What I mean by that is when they come on board, we typically give them like a coffee mug or a portfolio and say, thank you, we really appreciate it. Myself or Cortez each manage half the relationships. We're calling them ongoing to make sure everything, we go out to dinner with them, we go out to lunch when they're in town, and we basically, manage that relationship ongoing. And it's not even this summer when everything was happening, I touch base with all my clients. So, and we're very, very particular about our work. So all projects go out as a work. How students go through that process makes the determination of their grade.
Sandy, there was a question that I think is really relevant to the point you just made. The question was, do you ever follow up with the implementation of your projects or of the projects by your clients? Usually in consulting, it is hard to see the result of consulting recommendations. So to your point about maintaining this relationship, deepening the relationship, what's your view of once the project ends? Should you be following up at that point some months later? I know we've advised some schools to do it 3 months later. I'm curious what your experience has been.
Well, because 80% of our clients come back every year, I know that the project has been successful. They say, Sandy, we implemented that. So 80% of them I see on an ongoing basis. A lot of our clients, again, we're in Tucson, so a lot of our clients come back for different semesters. And so we know that they do. But before, when I first came on board, I followed up with all of them as well. So
Sandy, I'm curious. I want to hear your pitch. So let's say we're at a networking event, right? Some of the events you listed. I'm there, you're there. We don't know each other. What are you doing, and what would you say to me?
They'd say, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm at the university. What do you do? And I'd say, well, I help students get real life experience through project-based learning. Oh, what is that? Well, places like you, we look for people to partner with us so that we can have hands-on learning for the students doing real business, solving real business issues. So that's kind of it. And, because we're in a small community, if we're doing a networking event, they know of us, right? And if we're at an alumni event, this program, even though I've taken it over 5 years, the program in the MBA has run for 20 years. So although ran differently, it has been running. So as soon as I say what I do, the alumni know who I am.
And I imagine that takes time, like you're saying. It takes a little bit of time to build up that kind of awareness. And
yeah, it's not like I go one time and meet, somebody says, oh, I'll do a project, right? It's not like that. It's going all the time. And so, for instance, we recently got a project from a local mining company. I had been working with this company, working with different associates, touching base with them at different events, probably for 3 years. And now they're a secure partner. So, but every year I'd send them marketing stuff. Every year they're like, oh, we're not sure we'd get value out of that. They had a change of management. They jumped on board. They love it now. So like typical sales, right? It doesn't happen. You have to touch these people at a minimum of 6 to 7 times at a minimum. And sometimes it's a couple of years, but we're constantly doing that through LinkedIn with our alumni, sending them different experiences, pictures that we have on LinkedIn or whatever, talking about them. So, yeah.
Toni, let's hear about your program.
Many of the things that Sandy said are the same things that we do. We go to events, we touch base with people. It seems to me that when I'm talking to someone who's interested, most of the time they're interested in giving us a project, not because they think the students are going to develop the next tremendous money-making thing, but because they're interested in the students themselves. They want to develop relationships with our students. They want to get close to them. They want to know them. And they want to come on campus and be around them. And so that's kind of the pitch for me is, if you're interested in fostering the next generation of engineers or computer scientists, this is a great way to develop relationships with 4 students at a time. And a lot of times, employers come to us to sponsor projects because they want their name known to our students because they want to hire them. And almost every year, some employer will hire someone, and many times it's not even someone that was on their team, but they come to the presentations and they network and they get to know all the students, and they may say, oh, that gal over there would really fit into our company culture, or I really like the way that guy makes presentations, or whatever. So they come for a lot of reasons, but partly because they want to get to know our students and they want to develop relationships with them. You can see that we have about 2/3 of our projects every year come from external sponsors, and about 1/3 are student proposed. And then the internal projects, that's like somebody in the English as a second language department wants to develop some kind of a computer app, or maybe there's a new traffic pattern that needs to be developed by the Office of Sustainability. So we get once in a while a project from those, but mostly they're from the external sponsors.
And Toni, there's in bold here at the bottom of the slide, you mentioned that you try to build relationships with graduating seniors because they could be future clients, and also you have this advisory board who also helps source projects. Can you dive into both of those? I'd love to hear just kind of, practically, how does that work? How do you do that?
The design advisory board is a historical thing that we've had for many years, but as our team numbers have grown, we've had to add more design advisory board. And they really look forward to coming on campus. A lot of times they come mid-semester in the fall and then around Christmas time. And so I always make sure that there's some kind of a social event. Our presentations are from 3 to 5 usually. And so around 1 o'clock, I'll have kind of an open house with food and beverages for the design advisory board to come. And they come to network with each other and to get to know the students. And that is a really important part of our program. And if I'm low on mechanical projects one year, they don't all participate this way, but a lot of them will. If I call and say, hey, I'm really struggling to find enough mechanical projects, can you help me find one? They do. They are really remarkable people in the community. As far as the seniors go, I'm sure it's the way all the faculty just, you just get to know students, and my door is open all the time. Of course, it won't be this year because of COVID, but, and I spend a lot of time in the student projects lab, and I just try to get to know the students as much as I can. And I have a lot of friends on Facebook and LinkedIn that are alums, and just trying to maintain my relationships with them is really important.
And do you see them come back as project sponsors?
Yes, they love to come back and mentor a team. That is just a real thrill for most of them. They love it. If they sponsor a project, they usually end up being the faculty advisor for it if we need an adjunct for that project. And so they get to come in and get to know the team a little bit and spend time with us. And like I said, they're eligible for basketball tickets, and that's a big deal in Spokane. So they kind of fight for that. They kind of line up to be the faculty advisor.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, we've seen success. I don't know if you've both seen this or others in the audience, but our students, like you were saying, Sandy, that after going through a program like this, and especially if they've done it twice or 3 times, they tend to be really capable students, and they get good jobs, and we found they get promoted faster than their peers. I remember talking to one of our alums who went to Microsoft, and I talked to him, he said, I've only been here 18 months and I just got promoted again, which normally takes 3 to 5 years. And what happens is these companies say, well, where did you come from, right? Why are you so good? And usually they'll say, well, I went to the school, but they'll say I was a part of the program. And then it's easier for them to say, you know what, we should get more people like me, right? We should get, if you want more of me, let's go be a sponsor for one of these projects. in this case, Microsoft, we've done several projects with them. I don't know if you see that sort of thing, but the students kind of sell themselves once they get into the workforce.
They really do. We have a really strong alumni group at Boeing. Boeing is the biggest the biggest hirer, employer of former Gonzaga students that we have in both business and in engineering. And so there's a really active group of Gonzaga alums at Boeing, and most years they sponsor 4 to 6 projects for us, and they fly over for our presentations, and they're a real force on our campus. So it works out pretty well. A couple of people I see ask if our projects come from out of state. Most of ours are from in-state, although we do have some usually from Boise in Idaho, and we have some from Portland in Oregon, but a lot of our projects are just right here in Washington. And, this says, can you explain the sliding scale? Fortunately, our dean has given me a lot of leeway, and if I go in and I'm talking to a potential sponsor and they're really not sure about it, but I think it's going to work out, the main thing to me is to get good projects for the students. So I may do a project for $500. I may do a project for just what the materials cost for the first year and tell them, you know, this is a trial, and if it works out next year, I'll probably hit you up for a little more money. And it works fine, but you have to get the trust of your administration to be able to do that.
Sandy, were you going to jump into?
Yeah, I was just, as far as a majority of ours are from out of state or up in Phoenix. So our clients fly in to meet with the students. And just as you mentioned, Andrew, a lot of the big clients, Raytheon, Intel, Microsoft, Banner, they hire our graduates. So they look at this as an opportunity to preview the talent, right? And as far as pricing, I get free reign. I mean, when I first came on board, we weren't in such budget constraints and we fell under the MBA. So they like, don't worry about it, get what you can. And then over time, when we started adding more and more value, we started increasing it. And as budgets became more tight and I needed more staff, I started charging more and using that to explain, you know, well, I have budget to hire this person. So it's kind of, it's interesting. Now I'm being asked in these times, I think we could get more based on what you deliver to the clients. And I'm like, well, there's a point where you could push the envelope and push them out the door, you know? And so I think we're at a good point right now for our pricing, and our clients are still feeling a lot of value.
I should add that nationally, this might be counterintuitive, but project pricing is on the decline. And when we dig into that, it's not because existing programs like Sandy's or Toni's are reducing their fees. It's the opposite. The fees are going up over time. It seems to be because more projects are happening, period. And so schools are saying, all right, we have these boutique programs that charge a fee. They're professionally run, but we're going to add to that some other stuff that maybe isn't as mature an offering for projects. And then that stuff will be low cost or free. And often this takes the shape of a first year grad program project, or maybe a sophomore or junior year in undergrad, but kind of an interesting counterintuitive data point.
And I'm just going to jump in here. We're at the top of the hour. I just want to do a couple of quick things to close up. We didn't even get to our project scoping conversation, so we'll schedule another webinar for that. But I want to ask the audience for two things. One, you know, our goal is that you would leave this with at least one new idea. And so if you want to just post that in the chat, what's kind of one or two ahas that you received during the webinar today? One thing, and maybe it's from the panelists, maybe it's from some of the comments going on in the chat, which I'd love to see. What's one takeaway that you've gained from this webinar? And then the other thing is, if you have some topics that you'd like us to touch on through these webinar series, post that in the chat as well. We'll keep this going. And I want to thank our panelists, Sandy from University of Arizona and Toni from Gonzaga University. They've put a lot of time into this, but a lot of time into their jobs, which has been so insightful to hear from their experiences and take some lessons learned from them. So if you can, thank the panelists with me in the chat, or send them emails. I've got their, if you want to contact them directly, let me fast forward here. So you've got their emails here at the end. Feel free to reach out to them. A couple of quick updates with the consortium. We will find a way so that we can share contact information between members, so that you can reach out to each other. We can build this community. Also, we are hoping to partner with another university this fall to create a virtual summit series. And we're excited about this. We're having some meetings. There's a lot of topics already set in place. It looks to be super valuable. So we will keep you posted on that, but it looks like we'll do probably one of these a month through the fall, maybe even into the winter a little bit. So look for some communication from us. Thanks again for joining us, David. Thanks for co-hosting. And let's stay connected, and feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck, everybody.